They had everything: the fame, the fortune, the faces the world could never forget. But in Hollywood, every spotlight has a timer, and when it fades, it doesn't just take the fame, it takes everything. How do you go from million-dollar paychecks to counting coins, from red carpets to eviction notices, from owning mansions to begging for one last role? Behind the cameras, behind the glamour, there's a truth no one likes to admit. Fame doesn't last. Debt does. These are the stars who flew too close to the light and paid the price in silence. Once adored, now forgotten. Once envied, now broke. Their downfall isn't just about money. It's about what happens when the dream ends and the applause stops. Because in the end, Hollywood doesn't make you rich. It just rents you the illusion until the bill arrives. Lindsay Lohan, the girl who burned too bright. There was a time when Lindsay Lohan wasn't just Hollywood's favorite girl. She was Hollywood. Her smile could sell movies, her laugh could melt tabloids, and her name, whispered across red carpets, felt like a prophecy. The next Julia Roberts, the next Golden Girl. At just 11, she outshined veterans in The Parent Trap. By 17, she owned the teen box office with Freaky Friday and Mean Girls. She was talented, magnetic, unstoppable, and everyone wanted a piece of her. But in Hollywood, when everyone wants you, there's rarely anything left for you. Lindsay's rise was dizzying. She became the face of a generation. The party girl who could do no wrong until she did. Every studio offered her millions. Every magazine crowned her a queen. She lived faster than the flashbulbs could keep up. Designer clothes, private jets, penthouses in the hills, nights that blurred into mornings. But there's something no one tells you about fame. It doesn't just make you rich, it feeds on you. As the spotlight grew, her circle shrank. The friends who cheered her success vanished when the music stopped. The industry that adored her began to circle, sensing a downfall they could monetize. Behind the glamour, Lindsay was exhausted, fighting addictions she didn't understand, lawsuits she couldn't stop, and expectations no one could survive. She told Oprah once, "I just wanted to feel normal for one day, but I forgot how." A line that sounded like a confession, not an excuse. Every rehab stay cost more than a luxury car. Every comeback was marketed like a miracle and ended like a tragedy. The tabloids didn't just report her collapse, they celebrated it. The wild princess, they said, finally crashed. The truth was harsher. Lohan wasn't reckless. She was trapped in a machine built to consume her youth and sell her pain. Every photo, every scandal, every tear was worth something to someone else, except her. By the time the IRS froze her accounts, her empire had evaporated. She'd earned tens of millions and had almost nothing to show for it. Her team left. Her reputation died. Her name became a punchline. And so she fled. Not to another movie set, but to another world entirely. Dubai. A city where fame doesn't matter and paparazzi can't follow you. There she built something resembling peace. When asked about her past, she calls it a different lifetime. And maybe that's true, because the Lindsay Lohan the world remembers, that bright, untouchable starlet, she's gone. In her place stands a woman quieter, slower, almost reborn. There's something hauntingly poetic in it. The girl who once owned Hollywood now lives oceans away from it. Her fortune gone, her youth scarred, but her name still written in the city's mythology. She burned too fast, too young, and in doing so became the perfect symbol of what Hollywood does best. It builds its angels just to watch them fall. Nicolas Cage, the man who bought legends and lost himself. There was a time when Nicolas Cage wasn't just an actor, he was a force of nature, an Oscar winner with a face the camera loved and a hunger the world couldn't understand. He didn't perform. He exploded. In Leaving Las Vegas, he bled emotion. In National Treasure, he became America's most eccentric hero. At his peak, he was earning over $20 million per film, a living myth wrapped in sunglasses and chaos. But somewhere between the fame and the fortune, something shifted. Cage didn't buy luxuries. He bought legends. 15th century castles in Europe, a haunted mansion in New Orleans, rare cars that could fill museums, and of course a dinosaur skull worth hundreds of thousands. It wasn't greed, it was obsession. He was building his own kingdom, a bizarre empire that reflected the roles he played. Kings, warriors, madmen, dreamers. He wanted to live as large as his characters did, but even kings can go broke when they start believing their own myth. The bills mounted faster than the box office checks. When the IRS came knocking, they brought a debt so massive it stunned even Hollywood. More than $6 million in unpaid taxes. Suddenly, the man who once ruled the red carpet was auctioning off his castles and yachts, one by one. The media called it a meltdown. The tabloids called it karma. But Cage never hid. He never begged for sympathy. "I'll never retire," he said once. "I'll act till I die." It wasn't arrogance. It was survival. For Cage, acting wasn't a job. It was oxygen. So he worked, and worked. Dozens of films, small budgets, strange scripts, wild characters that no other actor would dare touch. And somehow, through the madness, he found something pure again. When the money vanished, the man remained, stripped of the excess, but burning brighter than before. In movies like Pig and Mandy, critics saw the Cage they'd forgotten, raw, fearless, alive. He'd lost the castles, the cars, and the prehistoric bones. But what he gained was rarer than fortune, authenticity, the kind of freedom you only get after losing everything that was supposed to define you. Hollywood once crowned him a king and then laughed as he fell. But Nicolas Cage never disappeared. He simply refused to die on anyone else's terms. Today, he still works constantly, not to reclaim the money, but to reclaim himself. And in that, he's found a strange kind of peace. Because some stars are never meant to fade quietly. They burn, they collapse, and then, against all odds, they rise again from the ashes. Wesley Snipes, the blade that cut too deep. There was a time when Wesley Snipes ruled Hollywood's kingdom of action like a warrior prince. The swagger, the stare, the impossible cool. He didn't just play heroes, he embodied them. When Blade hit theaters in 1998, it didn't just make money. It defined a generation of action cinema. Before Marvel became an empire, Snipes was a superhero revolution. He was strong, smart, deadly, a black action icon in an era that offered few. Every studio wanted him. Every paycheck came with another zero. For a moment, he was untouchable. But in Hollywood, the higher the throne, the sharper the fall. Behind the designer suits and sunglasses, the cracks began to show. Whispers of arrogance, rumors of control issues, and then something far worse. Wesley Snipes had stopped paying his taxes, not for 1 year, for many. Tens of millions vanished into bad investments and financial advice from people who saw his fame as an open vault. When the government came calling, they weren't interested in excuses, only numbers, and the numbers were brutal. Years of unpaid taxes had turned into an empire of debt. Suddenly, the man who fought vampires on screen was fighting auditors in courtrooms. Red carpets became court summons. Headlines replaced movie posters. And the world watched in disbelief as one of Hollywood's brightest flames went up in smoke. Snipes insisted he'd been misled, that he was a victim of his own advisors. But in 2008, the gavel fell. Guilty on 3 counts of tax evasion. His sentence, 3 years in federal prison. The blade was broken. Inside those walls, there were no cameras, no stunt doubles, no spotlight. Just time. The one thing fame never gives you. When he emerged, older and quieter, he carried not bitterness, but perspective. "I came out stronger," he said. "I came out cleaner." But Hollywood had already moved on. The roles that once waited for him had been handed to younger men with fewer scars. And yet Wesley Snipes refused to fade into nostalgia. He came back, not as a blockbuster titan, but as a survivor. Roles in The Expendables 3. Dolomite Is My Name, and Coming 2. America reminded the world that the fire was still there. Smaller, but somehow more real. He no longer chased fame. He chased purpose. In his quiet moments, he writes, he produces, he mentors, and somewhere behind that calm smile, you can still see the shadow of Blade. A man who fought demons, on screen and off, and learned that the most dangerous enemy isn't the system, it's ego. Wesley Snipes lost his wealth, his status, his empire. But what he gained, humility, might just be the rarest treasure in all of Hollywood. Because in a town that worships power, few ever learn that the real power is knowing when to let go. Chris Tucker, the comedian who laughed his fortune away. There was a time when Chris Tucker had the world laughing, and the world was paying him handsomely for it. That electric voice, that perfect comic rhythm, that boundless energy. It wasn't just talent, it was lightning in human form. When Rush Hour exploded into theaters in 1998, Tucker didn't just star in a blockbuster, he became one. At his peak, he was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood history, earning over $20 million for a single sequel. Comedy had made him rich, powerful, adored. He had what every comic dreams of: fame without scandal, laughter without limits, money without end. But in Hollywood, even laughter comes with an expiration date. After the success of Rush Hour 2, Tucker's career took an unexpected turn. Silence. He turned down scripts, waiting for the perfect one. He avoided the Hollywood party circuit, claimed he was searching for something deeper. But the deeper he searched, the longer he disappeared. Years passed. The sequels came slower. The checks stopped coming altogether. But the bills never did. Lavish homes, fleets of luxury cars, a life built on expectation. And when the IRS came knocking, the punchline was cruel. Chris Tucker owed millions in unpaid taxes. The headlines were merciless. Chris Tucker broke. From Rush Hour to bankrupt. The world that once laughed with him now laughed at him. He later admitted, "I made a lot of money. I just didn't pay attention." Simple words, painfully honest. Hollywood doesn't forgive those who stop feeding its machine. And by the time Tucker was ready to return, the industry had already found new faces, new voices, new comedians to idolize. But somewhere in that silence, something changed. The man who once defined excess found meaning in simplicity. He rediscovered his faith, not as a headline, but as a way out of despair. He began performing again, not in movies, but on stages around the world, in smaller venues, intimate shows, places where laughter felt real again. His fortune never recovered, but something else did. His joy. He learned that the world could take away his houses, his cars, his headlines, but it couldn't take away his gift. And slowly, that gift became his redemption. Chris Tucker no longer measures success in millions, but in moments. Each laugh, each standing ovation, each quiet night where no one is watching, but he still smiles anyway. The Hollywood dream turned him into a millionaire. Losing it all turned him into a man. Because in the end, money can buy a crowd, but it takes loss to teach you how to stand alone. Pamela Anderson, the goddess who lost her crown. There was a time when Pamela Anderson was everywhere, her face on every magazine, her body on every billboard. Her name whispered with awe, desire, envy. She wasn't just famous, she was mythical. From the crimson waves of Baywatch to the glossy covers of Playboy, Pamela embodied a dream larger than life itself. Beauty, power, freedom. Men adored her. Women envied her. And Hollywood? Hollywood built an empire around her image. But images fade. And when your fame depends on one, so does everything else. At the height of her career, Pamela earned millions. Endorsements, modeling deals, film roles, private villas, luxury cars, diamond jewelry. Her life looked like a fantasy written in sunlight. But behind the gold tones of the California dream was a woman quietly drowning in debt, divorce, and despair. The same beauty that gave her everything also became her cage. Every relationship became a headline. Every mistake, a scandal. And then came the tape. The private moments of a marriage stolen and sold to the world. Overnight, her pain became profit. For everyone but her. The lawsuits piled up. The contracts disappeared. The same tabloids that had made her a goddess now devoured her like prey. "I thought it would last forever," she once said softly, "but forever is short in Hollywood." Failed investments, lavish spending, and bitter separations drained her fortune. At one point, she owed millions in back taxes. Even her Malibu mansion, the symbol of her success, became another burden she couldn't keep. The woman who once symbolized luxury was forced to sell the dream just to stay afloat. But Pamela never hid. Even as the world mocked her, she smiled in the kind of smile that hides an earthquake behind it. "I'm a survivor," she'd say, though you could hear the tremor in her voice. When she finally left Hollywood behind and moved to a modest home in her native Canada, it wasn't surrender, it was liberation. There, away from the cameras, she found something she hadn't felt in decades: silence. She began writing poetry, rescuing animals, advocating for causes that didn't require makeup or microphones. She discovered that peace doesn't glitter. It breathes quietly, like the ocean she once ran beside in slow motion. Pamela Anderson lost her fortune, her spotlight, and the illusion of immortality. But she gained something rarer than all three: herself. Today she lives simply, surrounded not by cameras but by calm. The red swimsuit is gone, the stage lights have dimmed, but her story remains a reminder. In a city obsessed with eternal youth, sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is grow up. Brendan Fraser, the hero who fell and rose again. There was a time when Brendan Fraser was Hollywood's golden boy, the face of adventure, charm, and effortless warmth. He wasn't just a movie star, he was every man's hero. From George of the Jungle to The Mummy, Fraser ruled the screen with a kind of sincerity that felt rare even then, a blend of humor, humility, and heart that made the impossible seem human. Audiences loved him, studios adored him, and for a while he had it all: fame, fortune, and a family that grounded him amid the chaos. But even heroes get broken. Behind the camera's glow, Fraser's body began to collapse under the weight of his own stunts. Broken ribs, damaged knees, a shattered spine. Years of physical punishment left him in constant pain, the kind no applause could numb. Each sequel, each jump, each fight scene took something from him until there was almost nothing left. The roles slowed, the scripts stopped coming, and when the spotlight faded, real life struck with cruel precision. A painful divorce, a custody battle, mounting medical bills, and an industry that had already decided it was done with him. Then came something darker, a revelation few saw coming. Fraser quietly confessed that years earlier he had been sexually assaulted by a powerful figure in Hollywood. When he spoke out, he believed the truth would set him free. Instead, it silenced him. Calls stopped, invitations vanished. He wasn't just forgotten, he was erased. The once beloved hero found himself living in near seclusion, selling off properties just to survive. The man who once fought mummies on screen was now battling ghosts of trauma, of betrayal, of time. "I felt like I was disappearing," he said softly in one interview, his eyes welling with tears. The tabloids mocked his weight gain, his loneliness, his disappearance. They didn't see the man, they only saw the ruins. But deep inside, something still burned. Fragile, but alive. Years later, a whisper began to spread across the internet. Fans remembered. Clips resurfaced. The world that had turned its back began to ask, what happened to Brendan Fraser? And then, the comeback. When The Whale premiered in 2022, audiences wept. On screen, he wasn't an action hero anymore. He was broken, tender, human. Off screen, he was the same. When the standing ovation began, it didn't stop. 6 minutes, then 10. Fraser cried, trembling, as if realizing the world had finally forgiven him for being human. The Renaissance, they called it. But it wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. Brendan Fraser never regained his fortune, but he found something infinitely richer: meaning. He learned that you can lose everything: fame, money, reputation, and still find your soul again, waiting quietly for you to come home. "I know what it feels like to be broken," he said once, and perhaps that's why we love him even more now, because he showed us what it looks like to heal. In a city that worships perfection, Brendan Fraser became something far greater. He became real. And maybe that's why, when the applause finally came back, it sounded different. Not as celebration, but as redemption. Gary Busey, the wild one. Hollywood couldn't tame. There was a time when Gary Busey didn't just play wild men. He was one. He had the grin of a madman, the energy of a storm, and the talent that could bend a scene to his will. From the Buddy Holly story to Lethal Weapon, Busey didn't act. He erupted. He was unpredictable, magnetic, and utterly fearless, a man Hollywood couldn't look away from. In 1978, he earned an Oscar nomination for portraying the rock legend Buddy Holly. Critics hailed him as the next big thing, the rebel who would keep Hollywood honest. And for a while it seemed he would. Money came fast, roles came faster. He lived loud, drove fast, and treated the industry like an amusement park built just for him. He was Hollywood's wild heart, the one who didn't care about rules because chaos was his home, but chaos always collects its debts. In December 1988, everything changed. A motorcycle crash, violent, brutal, nearly took his life. He wasn't wearing a helmet. The accident left him with severe brain damage. Doctors said it was a miracle he survived. But when he woke up, he wasn't the same man. Something in his fire had shifted, flickered, burned unevenly. His thoughts became scattered, his temper shorter, his choices stranger. The charisma was still there, but it came with a shadow of instability. Hollywood, ever afraid of imperfection, began to back away. The scripts grew smaller, the calls rarer. He drifted into low-budget roles, guest appearances, and eventually the surreal world of reality television. Still, Busey refused to play victim. When asked about the crash, he didn't call it tragedy. He called it awakening. He said he'd seen the other side, that he'd spoken to angels, that life wasn't about fame or fortune, but energy. To many, it sounded like madness. To Gary, it was freedom. But spiritual awakening doesn't pay the bills. Years of medical expenses, failed ventures, and reckless spending drained what little he had left. By 2012, the man who once earned millions filed for bankruptcy. His assets, less than $50,000. His debts, over $1 million. The headlines came again, cruel and gleeful. Gary Busey broke. The same papers that once called him Hollywood's wild genius now labeled him a fallen curiosity. And yet, he smiled. When asked about his financial ruin, he said, "I'm rich in spirit. Money? That's just paper." It was part tragic, part poetic, the kind of defiance only a man who's lost everything could mean. Because in his own strange way, Busey did win. He refused to let the industry's version of success define him. He kept working. Conventions, interviews, fan events. Not for fame, but connection. He became a cult figure, equal parts absurd and beloved. To some, he's Hollywood's madman. To others, he's a reminder that survival, no matter how messy, is still victory. Today, Gary Busey lives quietly in California. No red carpets, no million-dollar paychecks, just peace, stories, and the occasional spark of chaos that made him unforgettable. His career burned bright, then burned out. But the legend, that strange, wild legend, never truly died. Because in Hollywood, perfection fades. But madness is immortal. End of part 1. They had it all, until Hollywood took it back. 7 stars. 7 different rises and falls. Each a mirror reflecting the same truth, that fame is a currency with no refund policy. Up next, part 2. Born in luxury, died in debt. The heirs, the believers, the broken.